Thank you, sir. Crossing the river by feeling the stones. I'm actually going to talk about strategy, one of those dreadfully awful subjects. I'm going to talk about it in a personal sense by starting off with a company that I used to run, for Tango. Now, we had about 16 different lines of business. This is 2002, 2003. One of them was an online photo service, many millions of users, very profitable, lots and lots of revenue. It was all good, except for one problem. The problem was me. I was the CEO. And rather than being some sort of chess-playing master, I was a fake CEO. I was more the alchemist. I was just copying others. I hadn't got a clue what I was doing. But it was okay, because we were making money. Now, we had things like vision statements, things like this. Our strategy is customer-focused. We will lead an innovative effort of the market through our use of agile techniques and open source. This was 2003, roughly. But there's nothing special about this. I'd actually nicked it from somebody else. I just borrowed other people's strategy and sort of combined it together. And I started to notice I wasn't the only one. I would go around conferences and listen to CEOs talking about strategy, and I'd start recording what they were saying, looking for common terms and memes, or what I call business-level abstractions of a healthy strategy, or BLAs for short. And I've done this over the years. And last time was about 2014, and these are the common BLAs that people said. Digital business, big data, disruptive, innovative, collaborative, competitive advantage, ecosystem, open source, etc., or blah, blah, blah. And then I would combine various people's strategy documents together and create a BLA template. So our strategy is BLA. We will lead a BLA effort of the market through our use of BLA and BLA to build a BLA. And then I would ram the BLAs and the BLA templates together and auto-generate a bunch of gibberish, 64 different strategies. I thought I'd go through them. Number one, our strategy is customer focus. We will lead a disruptive effort of the market through our use of innovative social media and big data to build a collaborative, it's just pure gibberish. Number two, our strategy is innovative digital business. We will lead a growth effort of the market through our use of customer focus, competitive advantage, and disrupt. Oh, I can barely say the words, it's that awful. But I'd send them around and I'd get responses from people. And last time I got about 400 responses of three basic types. The first one was, this is the exact wording from our business plan. The second one was, I've seen two of these used already. And my favorite was, are you for hire? So a friend of mine, by the way, has put this all online. This is strategy as a service. The URL's at the bottom. If you ever need a strategy, just type in the URL. It will auto-generate you one. I did this a couple of days ago. Our strategy is collaborative. We will lead an effort of the... anyway, if you don't like it, just press refresh until you get one that you do. So there I was in 2004, CEO of this company, realizing that something was a bit suspect. So I went back to Sun Tzu. Anybody know what Sun Tzu wrote? Excellent, super. So Sun Tzu talked about 5 factors that mattered in competition. First, have a purpose, moral imperative, a vision, where you're going, a mission. Next, understand your landscape, the environment you're competing in. Then, understand the climactic patterns, or in business terms, economic patterns that impact the landscape. Then, understand doctrine, universal principles of organization, and finally, you get to leadership, context-specific forms of gameplay. Then I came across John Boyd. Anybody know what John Boyd did? OODA loops, US Air Force pilot. So what you've got is you've got the game, that's your purpose. I want to be the best tea shop in Ashford, which is near where I live. The next thing you do is observe the environment. That's the landscape, climatic patterns. Then you orientate around it with doctrine, and then you get into the decision and acting bit. That's the leadership. So it's a nice little cycle. And I would share this around with people, rather excited, and they would go, it doesn't matter, it's all about the importance of why. I thought that's interesting, because there's two whys. There's the why of purpose, as in I want to be the best tea shop, and then there's the why of movement. Why do I make this decision over that decision? And they're very different things. So if you think of a game of chess, the why of purpose is to win the game. The why of movement is here or there. Which piece do I move? And it's through movement that we actually learn. So going back to Fatango, there I was. I had my little strategy cycle, very exciting. And we sort of had a purpose. We had these 16 lines of business. We were making money. It was sort of a pretty messy sort of thing. And then I thought, well, how do we observe the landscape? And this led me on to a subject known as situational awareness. And the best way I can explain this is with 3 stories: Vikings, chess, and Themistocles. So Vikings, very frightening. This is how they used to navigate. From Herman, head due west towards Half, and you would have sailed north of Hatland so that you can just glimpse it in clear weather. They use stories. You'd learn, your epic story for 15 years before you were put in charge of a boat. Now that means that. Now, we use maps all the time for navigation. If somebody asks you directions, you get out the phone, or if they've got a map, you point, or if they have neither, you give them a story. Up the road, turn left, turn right, at the roundabout, second left, off you go. And they drive off, and you're left with that moment. Did I send them in the right direction? Maybe I'm evil. So what would you use to navigate? Visual map or a verbal story? What do you think? Visual map? Verbal story? Visual map. Okay. What do we use in business? Story. Okay. Chess world. I want you to imagine you live in a world where everybody plays chess, but no one's ever seen the board. All you've ever seen are these characters on a screen. And you play the game very simply. You press a button, pawn. Your opponent sees what you've pressed, so they counter, pawn. You counter, pawn. They counter, queen. And the game goes on for ages until somebody's won or it's a draw. Now, what will happen is people will take these sequences of data through many games, stick it into their big data systems, and come up with secrets of success. So if you press queen, I should respond with, I don't know, knight, pawn, or something along those lines. And if you don't think we do that in business, this is Harvard Business Review, how earlobes can signify leadership potential. Secrets of success. Anyway, so one day you'll play a game of chess against somebody who will see something magical. They will see the board. And you will move, and they will counter. And you will move, and they will counter, and you will have lost. And you'll be sitting there going, what the fiddlesticks happened there? I've been doing this for 20 years. They've only been playing a week. First thing you're going to do is write down the sequence like it's some magic secret of success. You'll use that, you'll lose. Then you'll go, maybe it's the speed at which they press the button. You'll still lose. Then you'll go, is it cultural? Are they a happy sort of person? You'll still lose. You exist in what's known as a low-level situational awareness environment. They exist in a high. So what would you use to learn? Secrets of success or context-specific play? Context-specific play, excellent. What do we use in business? Excellent. Right. So next one is Themistocles. Themistocles, ancient politician, Greek general, had a problem. The Persians were invading. What he decided to do was to block off the Straits of Artemisium, force the Persians along the coastal road into Thermopylae, which is a narrow pass where a small number of troops could defend against a large force. Now, there were about 170,000 Persians. There were about 4,000 Greeks, including 300. Excellent. So I want you to imagine you're part of the Athenian army, part of the Greek states. It's the eve of battle. Themistocles is standing there. He's giving you purpose, a moral imperative. You know, we've got to fight these Persians, the invading horde. And then he says to you, I do not understand the landscape. I do not understand the environment. I have no map, but have no fear, for I have created a SWOT diagram. Strengths: a well-trained Spartan army, a high level of motivation not to become a Persian slave. Weaknesses: the ephors might stop the Spartans turning up. A truckload of Persians are turning up. Opportunities: get rid of the Persians. Get rid of the Spartans. We're Athenian. We hate the Spartans. And the threats: the Persians get rid of us. And the oracle says a really dodgy film might be produced a few thousand years later. So, what would you use to communicate and determine strategy in battle? Position and movement, as described by a map, or a magic framework like a SWOT? Position and movement. You know what's coming. What do we use in business? Magic framework, yay. So if I go back to the whole sort of chess versus alchemy bit, and I look at navigation, learning, and strategy, well, in chess, it's all visual. Navigation, it's context-specific learning. It's about position and movement. It's what we call a high-level situational awareness environment. It's a bit like the military. So if you go to a general and say, you know, why did you bomb that hill? They won't turn around to you and say, because 67% of other generals are bombing hills. They won't say, because I read an article in General Weekly that bombing hills was the latest thing. They won't say, because it would make a good story, or that's what Uber would do. It's all about position, movement, where and why. Now, alchemy, it's all about storytelling, secrets of success, magic frameworks. It's a low-level situational awareness environment, and that's where I was, as the fake CEO. I didn't know what I was doing, making loads of money, very profitable, but I hadn't got a clue. And so that's where I was. And so I realized the difference between these two environments is the existence of maps. And maps have certain characteristics. They are visual, context-specific, as in the battle at hand. You have position of pieces, an anchor. You have movement, consistency of movement and components. Now, what I had in business were things like this: network topology diagrams, or business process maps, or value stream maps has become popular, or mind maps. And what's interesting about them is they don't have those characteristics. Network topology doesn't have position, doesn't have anchor, doesn't have movement. I didn't have any maps. So I decided to create myself a map. Remember, I'm the fake CEO. I assumed everybody else in the world in 2005 had maps. I was the only one who didn't. So I created an anchor, focus on the customer, then created a value chain. So if you think about a cup of tea needs things. It needs tea, it needs hot water. Hot water needs cold water, it needs a kettle. Kettle needs electricity and power. You can create a chain of needs out of anything. So I started with my anchor, my customer, what their needs, and what those things needed, and created a chain of needs. And that gives me an anchor and position. I'm still missing movement. Fortunately, things evolve through a common pathway. You start off with the genesis of novel and new things, custom-built examples, products and rental services, commodity and utility services. So I was able to organize things along that pathway, and now I have a map. Way. So what? Well, if I've got a map, I can now start to learn climactic patterns. These are the rules that influence the game. Things like this. Everything evolves. If you have a map, you discover nothing stands still. It's all moving from left to right due to supply and demand competition. Characteristics change. Doesn't matter whether it's money, penicillin, or computing. It starts in this uncharted space where it's chaotic, uncertain, unknown, and over time it becomes industrialized, ordered, standard, stable, dull, boring. Efficiency enables innovation. As something evolves, electricity, computing, doesn't matter what it is, it expands the adjacent, unexplored, the uncharted space. It enables us to create novel and new things. But sometimes these changes aren't linear. Sometimes they're exponential, particularly when we shift from product to utility. That we have inertia to change caused by past success. Blockbuster, Netflix. Who was first with a website? Brilliant. Who was first with video ordering online? Excellent. Who was first with video streaming online? Yay! Who went bankrupt first? Yay! It wasn't the fact that they lacked innovation, they had a pre-existing business model, which created inertia. It was late fees. It was the fact that you had to take your video back. That's where they made their money. Now, if you start to discover the common economic patterns, and there are 27 of them, you can start to anticipate fairly obvious change. So there I was with my line of business in 2005. I knew that everything would evolve, so platform and compute would go to a utility. I knew it would have inertia to the change, and I knew it would enable new, novel, and new higher order systems. Yay! This is good for me from the point of view of where do I invest? Do I want to continue with my online photo service, or build the world's first ever platform as a service, or maybe invest in something novel and new built on top of them when they start to appear? Of course, I would say this to people, and then cloud appeared, and I would go, oh, look, it's happening, and they would go, cloud is just for startups, And you'd respond, it'll dominate in 10 to 15 years' time, and they will go, burn him, heretic, all that sort of stuff. So now we understand our purpose, and we start to understand our landscape, and we start to understand climatic patterns, so we're starting to anticipate. We get into doctrine. What's doctrine? These are the universal applicable principles, regardless of context. So climatic patterns impact you whether you like it or not. Things evolve, you don't get a choice about that. But some patterns you get to decide. Some of them are context specific. Some of them, doctrine, are universally useful. They're things like focus on user needs. What a surprise. That turns out to be universally useful. The other thing, if you have multiple groups mapping, like borders, immigration, police, and you share maps, you start to discover we have duplication and bias in the system. Now, this is within government. And lots of people say, oh, government's highly inefficient. I just want to dispel that myth. This is my leaderboard of mass duplication, or IT weapons of mass duplication. The worst example in government I've ever found is 118 teams building the same thing. Now, I've got a global pharma with 300 teams building the same thing, and at least 5 global efforts to build the global example of the same thing without any of them knowing the others existed. I've beaten that. I've got a bank who has over 1,000 risk management systems. They're always going, we can't innovate, but they're brilliant at innovation. They just recreate the wheel in a slightly different shade of blue. The next thing you start to discover is, once you've got maps, is that different methods have suitability at different spaces. So, for example, outsourcing Six Sigma is very good on the right-hand side. Lean, off-the-shelf products is very good in the middle, where things like agile techniques and building in-house are very good on the left. Why? Because agile is very good at reducing the cost of change. Lean is very good at reducing waste and learning, whereas Six Sigma is very good at reducing deviation. There's no one-size-fits-all. And so this sort of stuff we learned in government with things like HS2 back in 2011. High-speed rail, it's our railways. Yeah, you don't use one-size-fits-all. And then you start to discover you need to think small, build small teams, hire cell-based structure. So you break things down, small contracts, build small teams. Amazon use 2 pizza, no team bigger than can be fed by 12 people. then you start to discover that the cultural attitude you need is different. So on one side, it's all about pioneers, very good exploring the uncharted space, so they run and operate this. But then you need settlers, a different attitude, brilliant people who are brilliant at not creating the half-crazed thing which sort of does something amazing but really doesn't work. They're really good at making something which everybody wants and is useful. And so they operate in the middle, and then you have these brilliant people, town planners, who are very good at taking that stuff and industrializing it, making the empires of scale. Now, I haven't got time to go through that. Fortunately, GCHQ, that's our intelligence services, have open-sourced Boiling Frogs. So if you search online, Boiling Frogs GCHQ, you'll find this wonderful document which talks about how to organize and the different roles needed. It's fabulous, brilliant stuff. So anyway, there's about 40 different forms of doctrine. So we start off with purpose, understand our landscape. We start learning the 27 common economic patterns. We start to anticipate. We start to orientate and organize ourselves with doctrine, focusing on user needs, building small teams, etc. And finally, we get to the leadership bit. This is context-specific forms of gameplay, of which there are 70. So you take your map. I can anticipate where things are going. I can see where I could potentially invest. So it's now a question of why do I invest here, over there? And often the answer is because I can manipulate the market. I can use open source plays to drive something to a more industrialized form. I can slow it down with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I can use constraints. There's all sorts of ways I can change the market. And so then you act, which is what I did in 2005. We used the map, identified a changing space that was happening, and we built the first ever platform as a service, or serverless environment, as you'd call it today. Functional billing. You just wrote code. It was called Zimkey. It was great. It was expanding like hotcakes. We changed our purpose, we were building, and then unfortunately the parent company got some strategy consultants in. And they told us it's not the future. Well, the three things that we were doing, 3D printing mobile phones as cameras and cloud, were not the future. Apparently the future was 3D television. So by the way, anybody own a 3D TV? No one dares admit it. Right, okay. So we shut it down. I went to a company called Canonical, provides something called Ubuntu. Ever heard of Ubuntu? Yay, right. So we mapped out the environment, 2008, and used it to attack the space. There we were, 300 against the mighty hordes of Microsoft and Red Hat. 2008, that's us at the bottom. 2010, 18 months later, was 70% of all cloud computing. Then I went to work with government. Wrote something called the Better for Less paper, and we use mapping in various parts of government to transform it. These days, I use it at nation-state competition level. So China versus USA, etc. By the way, the stuff that's going on in Shenzhen and China is truly amazing around the IoT space. So quick summary, strategy is a cycle. It's an iterative process. The most important thing to do is act, because that's how you learn, but it's also really important to understand the landscape when you're doing so, which is what crossing the river by feeling the stones is all about. Understand the landscape, take small steps, constantly act, iterative process. Have a purpose and direction. So I thought I'd finish off with a little bit about DevOps. Talk about the future of DevOps. Because there's an interesting pattern, climactic pattern, called coevolution. So when compute was a product, when we used to build applications, we used to build them on an emerging architectural practice, which was based upon the concept of high MTTR, high mean time to recovery. So I'd have a server, and when my server went bang, it would take me weeks to get a new one. Everybody remember those days? Well, some of you will, some of you won't. Okay. So we used to build based upon the concept of high MTTR. So scale up, big machines, N+1, disaster recovery test. And so those practices evolved and became best practice for computers as a product. We used to laugh at people who hadn't done their capacity planning. Oh, you silly person. And then compute evolved, became a utility. And it had a different set of characteristics. Now, these characteristics were all about agility, efficiency, and so forth. So lots of people in the business would say, make my legacy cloudy. And so we'd stick it on Amazon. Amazon would have an outage. And then people would run around saying the end of cloud is nigh. Do you remember those? And we'd say, well, hang on, shouldn't our architecture evolve as well? To which they'd go, burn him, heretic, all that sort of stuff. But the reality is what happened is we got a co-evolved practice. We got a new emerging architectural practice. We're no longer scaling up, we're scaling out. Not bigger machines, lots of small ones. Not N+1, but, design for failure, the introduction of chaos engines, etc. And that spread, and that became DevOps. And it's co-evolution of practice. And that happened in the mechanical industry, happened in banking, all over the place. Naturally, those who were experts in the past practice had inertia to this change. But a new tribe formed. And we would say, it's all about user needs, it's about measurement, iterative cycles, automation, collaboration, speed, feedback loops, wow. And they'd respond, so was ITIL. Burn him, heretic. We're like the child and the father. I'm nothing like you, Dad. You've got my genes. No, I don't. Yes, we did inherit from ITIL, but of course we deny it. And the same is going on with platform now. We're moving from platform products, so platform stacks, LAMP stack, etc., and it's becoming more of a utility. So things like Lambda, serverless environments, and we're starting to see an emerging architectural practice, God knows what it's going to be called, into something else, but a new set of practices, and that's where today you should be investing. Serverless, and in those, discovering what those new practices are. And of course, we're going to get the best architectural practice about coding, resist it. We're going to get best architectural practice around infrastructure, resist it. And even DevOps, because now we're below the line. We don't matter so much. We'll resist it. And this new architectural practice will form. And we'll go, and they'll tell us it's all about user needs, measurement, iterative cycles. And we'll go, so was DevOps. And they will go, burn him, heretic. Why? Well, the child always refuses to be what the parent is. And of course, if you run around telling people that tribes have got a tribe, that the future of DevOps is what my mum and dad did, it is the future legacy, well, they all respond, burn him, heretic. So, to learn more about mapping very quickly, it's all Creative Commons, medium.com, Wardley Maps. There's about 17 chapters of a 600-page book. You can read it all there. I occasionally do map camps. Well, okay, I don't actually do map camps. I tweet, I'm going to be in this place. Anybody want to meet up? And within 2 hours, an entire conference was created, so that was wonderful. And the company I work for also provides online training courses. They're like $75, cheap as possible, for people who want to use a video way of learning maps, so discount code, social maps. You can learn at Leading Edge Forum. But as I said, it's all Creative Commons. That's my talk. I think I'm on the minute. On the minute. Thank you very much.